Thanks, Ajit, and thanks for that distinction. This is a point that we are grappling with in the literature on development funding and on this particular study. That where does the CSR stand? Unfortunately, because of making it mandatory, it has moved from being philanthropy to taxation, to just to be just to push it to one. And then that was the worry back then when we were wondering whether this 2%, where would this 2% end up with, and we were, most of us were so prescient that now we see that it turned out to be another 2% tax. So thanks for drawing that attention. And given the nature of CSR and the sheer volume of the funds that CSR generates, it is become central to a lot of questions on development funding. But moving forward, and Sanjula, do you want to ask your question? Uh, it's actually a very good
Yeah.
question, continuing our conversation. Yes, Sanjula.
Yeah, so the question I asked is that is mandated CSR in India actually necessary or useful, or can corporate philanthropy in India do better without it? Like, does the government need to be involved in this field?
That's a very, very interesting question and a very loaded question.
It is.
There are pluses and minuses. Like all policies, there's a plus and a minus to it. I think one is I have to remember that not all of us are like Tatas. There's the corporate sector and there's the corporate sector, and many are quite happy to extract and make profits and put nothing back. Because there's a range of views from the business of business is business, and corporate social responsibility is to maximize your profit. Two, that you are part of a community, and Tata's, we've been 150 years, we've been there, and we're part of a community. We see ourselves as part of a community. So at Tata, when that law came in, we actually found that our larger companies, many of them were over and above. They're well over 2% of their profit before tax, but many weren't, and so it was a huge wake-up call. So I think the downside is that it becomes like a tax. Ultimately, it moves towards tax. It started off that it's not meant to be something that is a tax. It's meant to be something voluntary. You have to either spend or explain. And you are within the law if you explain and say that, sorry, we haven't spent because of these reasons. But it's moving more, it's taking more and more tax-like features, and especially the amendments of January 21 have made it almost a tax. And this was going to happen. I mean, I'm sure these were objections that were put up right in the beginning, that the nature of the state is such that it will work towards a tax. Having said that, the law had many positive repercussions as well. It first said what is CSR and what is not CSR for expenditure. That your local policeman's curtain needs to be replaced. You may still have to do it, but you can't claim a CSR that this is corporate social responsibility. Earlier, it could be part of the corporate social responsibility. So what is CSR? What is not CSR? That is reasonably clarified. Secondly, that it's made CSR into a board level. It's under the oversight of the board directly. So earlier CSR was something like Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Who cared what happened? Do something. Nobody cares. In a large company, nobody cared. And you're judged more by there shouldn't be any demonstrations at the factory gate or something like that. Means you're doing your job well enough. And that was an indicator. That how many demonstrations at the factory gate and on CSR effectiveness before. Now it's a board, and boards think very differently about how they look very differently at any function, and you have to really upgrade yourself to be under the purview of a board. So that's made a huge difference. The board overview of CSR. So positives, negatives. Am I glad they did it? I mean, the very fact that no other country has followed the example. We were the first, and we are still the only one to have converted. So probably, there's good reasons why why other countries have not followed our example. At the same time, it's made this consciousness about corporate social responsibility, and a criticism is that it's narrowed it down. That this is CSR, and if you're doing this, you're all right, and it leaves a a lot of the other aspects of corporate responsibility that I was talking about, and especially on the environmental side, how you use water, how your business and human rights, how your supply chains operate, how you use waste. Are you dumping here and there? Are you polluting? Are you that comes out of corporate social responsibility? And it's just that this 2%, it's how you use your money and not how you use your profits, and not how you make your profits. Whereas the broader understanding of corporate social responsibility is not only how you use your profits, but it's also how you make your profits. So there are pluses and minuses on this, but it's a very good question, and one that we deal with every day and all the time, policy-wise and practically also on the ground.
Hi, Murli here.
Yeah, Mulli, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. A couple of things. I really liked your lecture and how these things are determined. Way back in 2000, say 5 or 6, the entire UN system was crying foul that there is a diminishing funding for the development sector by and large. And I know this is continue to be true, particularly for those, but if you look at the fund available for development sector, that has not diminished, but the funds coming to this so-called developmental organizations such as UN and various other, they have come down, maybe because the wisdom of various philanthropists such as Gates and other people. I mean, I don't judge anything, but I'm just telling the facts. So if in comparison to that, where funds used to go through these international development organizations as against the philanthropies coming themselves to support the development sector, how is that it has really changed? If I may ask that question, although it's quite a huge question to ask, but since you have dealt with so many other issues in the development, particularly of the CSR sector. And what I feel in the current CSR sector is that particularly the government CSR, they go into the government kitty. They don't really come to any NGOs. I mean, maybe to the tune of less than 20% come to the at least mostly at least 80% goes to MLAs and other things. This is what, because a couple of my friends who are CEOs at those CSR are mentioning these things. So it may be, I'm sure it is true. So in this context where there is crisis, at least some international and national developmental organizations feel in terms of funds, but the availability is more, which is directly, determined or implemented by the philanthropists themselves, both in case of Azim Premji or Gates Foundation and perhaps Infosys Foundation, etc. They themselves are doing. So how is it that bringing an effectiveness, particularly on the result-oriented matrix that you are talking about?
I'm on mute, yeah. So thanks for that. Our own experience is that on the NGO system, CSR is not obliged to fund the NGOs. There's no requirement that you're supposed to fund NGOs. If you do fund NGOs, it's because you find that it's the most convenient way to reach the people that you want to reach. At least in most of the larger organizations that I've seen, there are things we do very well ourselves at Tata, but there are things we don't know how to do. And community mobilization, that sort of stuff, we don't know that. We don't understand these things. We understand very hierarchical setups and so on. So, and I remember personally, I was handling the post-disaster relief in Nepal. I was sitting on the Chinese border, and the trafficking of girls was going on in front of me, and children and that sort of thing. And nothing, our systems, we didn't know how to handle it, how to deal with it, and that sort of thing. But SOS knew exactly what to do. SOS Children's Villages of India. So the partnerships that happen with NGOs are because it's a two-way process. It's not because we like funding NGOs or something like that, or that NGOs need funds. It's because they bring in a certain skill and knowledge that we don't have, and that we work better together. It's better for the people we want to affect positively. It's better for them that there's a partnership between this. So that's why funding of NGOs happens and not otherwise. So I don't know about giving it to MLA. I don't know how CSR money can go to an MLA. The systems don't allow it, but I'm sure that some companies manage to work this out. But certainly in Tata, it's not possible to give an MLA directly money from your CSR funds. These are all accounted for, and that's why it's very difficult to do. But you brought up this issue of the UN system, and we too see that the UN system is completely broke. They need money to do what they do, and which used to come from the system, the governmental funding to the UN system from wherever. But it's not happening, or rather, it's happening at a much lower scale. They all have fundraising arms now, and for CSR and corporate donate partnership things and so on. But we also see that they don't really like the corporate sector. They see that they want the money, but they don't want any inputs from the corporate sector, and they don't see anything other than money in the corporate sector. And we have good systems, we have good people, we have ideas, we have innovation, we have a lot of things that can address societal problems and would do it very effectively. But the UN system just it sort of pays lip service to that, but all it wants is money. And I'm personally uncomfortable, and at Tata we are uncomfortable with that sort of relationship. That paise chahiye, lekin if we are giving you money, we have to be giving you something much more, and we have to be at the tables that are deciding how to do these things. If you are not welcome to the table, we are not interested in supporting this thing. And so there are issues. There are issues on that. And you'll see that the MDGs, the difference between the MDGs and the SDGs. MDGs just assume that there are NGOs, there's government, and there's the UN. SDGs suddenly say that, okay, there's a corporate sector that has to do something. But the corporate sector has to actually support the process by doing something more than give money to the UN. They don't have that. And we have problems with that. And, so at Tata, if we are giving money, we have to be at the table that is making decisions. Otherwise, thanks, but no thanks. We don't. And this Western dominated way of thinking, we don't subscribe to it.